This is a story of Reg Pryor as a Coast Guard at St Aldhelms Head. 35 years of Coast Guard work, which started in 1956 and ended in 1992. It all began when I was a small lad, and my father, he was a Coast Guard, and I used to go up with him to St Albans Head and watch them fire the rocket. And they used to throw lead in them days on the end of a stick to see how far they could throw it. And they used to throw quite a long way. And they used to put, I think, a couple of bob on a time. And the one who threw the lead the furthest collected the money. My father told me that Ted Bartlett nearly always won the money because he could throw the furthest out of all of them most of the time. Sometimes he didn't quite do it, but most of the time it was Ted Bartlett. Yeah, well, my father, he was Coast Guard before me. He was in it before the Second World War and during the war. He in them days they used to go up to the lookout and they'd go up at night, walk along the cliff to see if any Germans had landed. There were army chaps about as well they used to meet up with. They used to get challenged quite a bit because the army used to think probably they were Germans. So it was Houns Tout goes there, friend or foe. But when they didn't meet the army, they met into badgers and things like that along the cliff path. So all in all, it was a bit of a frightening thing, really, walking the cliffs at night, late at night, and didn't know who was about. On the moonlight nights, it wasn't quite so bad, but anyway, we never did anything like that. We had the lookout all the time. I remember my father saying once they were in the lookout, him and Percy Wallace, and the Germans came attacked in the daytime, machine gunned the lookout, and all down across the plains at St Aldhelms Head down to Haslam's Quarry they machine gunned, and of course the RAF camp was further down, and they dropped a bomb down there which killed which hit the cookhouse and killed the cook apparently, but none of the Coast Guards got shot up at all. They had a good concrete roof on the top of the lookout at that time, and they sort of got away with it. But the Germans certainly knew the RAF was about there. But they used to bomb it at night and always miss and hit. Either they dropped 8 bombs at Kingston, where they overshot the camp, the RAF camp. They dropped their bombs anywhere. Anyway, getting back to me coast guarding, I started in 1956. I remember I came out of the army 54, came back to Worth Matravers, built myself a house, and I believe I was about to move in pretty friendly with Bob Harris. He was in the LSA crew. Let's call it the LSA crew in them days. And he said to me, "Why don't you come on a Coast Guard with us then, Red?" He said, "We got a competition on down at oh, where's the place? Down Portland on Chisel Beach there," he said. "Come down," he said, "join up and join in." I said, "Well, I'll come down and have a look." So I went down and had a look and saw them the year they won the competition. It was a competition for the LSA crews, and they were, I forget which team they were playing there, and
White Breeches.
they were the fastest and always the best and the fastest. They were good. And I thought, well, I better join this crew then, hadn't I? Anyway, I joined them. My father was still in it, and he did 34 years. And that's when I joined, 1956, in December 12th, 8th or 12th December. And I did the LSA rescue. It wasn't long before we had to be out at night when we had a ship run aground at Chapmans Pool. He ran right up on the rocks, like east of Chapmans Pool. One ran aground there, I remember, and we were called to that late at night. Then let me think. The other ones was we had the Lumey go aground. That's the night I was on watch up in the lookout, 2 o'clock in the morning. Just ran aground in bait up. That was another one. That was two. So, and then before that, there was the Sand Dart. That's right. That's the one I was trying to think about. Sand Dart ran aground right in St Aldhelms Head in thick fog one night. And, well, I'll tell you the story about the Sand Dart. It was, I was supposed to be on watch that night. And I've been doing a lot of watches up at the lookout. It's a lonely place when you're up there on your own. And I decided I didn't want no more of it, so I thought I'd pack it in for a while doing the watches. So the station officer did it for me that night, and lo and behold, about 10:30, this boat ran aground right and under the lookout. Of course, I was in bed, I think, when they called us out. We had to go up there. Few of them had gone up and decided to carry the gear down to pier bottom and under the rocks. When I did get up there and I said, "Well, I know for a path down over the cliff," I said, "but I said it's a bit dodgy. There's a quicker way down. You need a rope really." But in them days, nobody dangled a rope. They got the light up on the top to show you the way down. And me and the Coast Guard set out. Coast Guard. He was ginger chap. I can't remember his name. He followed me down, and it wasn't long. He was carrying a Breeches Buoy. I was carrying something else, and it wasn't long before he slipped and slid down. He lost his hat. That rode past me, and a few stones came down, and then he slid down head first down towards me. And I had a light. I shone the light on him. I said, "You all right?" He looked up. He said, "Yes, I'm all right." He had his head in the Breeches Buoy, so he didn't really hurt himself. He just slid on the loose stones that was there. But anyway, we got down to the Sand Dart, which was nearly right up on the shore. But there's some water between the boat and the rocks, and it wasn't long before the others turned up, coming along the other way, and then more came down over the cliff. So we had our full crew there, waiting to see if anyone wanted taking off with the Breeches Buoy and that. So we managed. We was going to put a line aboard, but they fired a rocket and shot a line inland. So we was able to pick up their line and get our whip lines out to them. And once we got the lines out, well, the lifeboat came round, that's right, and he took off all the crew except three. That was the captain, the mate, and the engineer they left on. Yeah, and that they were the ones we sort of had to look after to make sure nothing happened to them. So anyway, it was thick fog, and the boat was well out in the water, but the tide was running hard, beginning to run hard, and there was a little bit of swell coming in there. But the Lyndhurst, S.O. Lyndhurst was a boat, a tanker that was offshore there, and he said he'd try and get a rope aboard the Sand Dart and pull her off. Of course, he couldn't come in too close because of the fog, and he couldn't see the Sand Dart. So he waited around for some time. He was going to try, and then he gave up in the end. The sea got so rough that the old Sand Dart there was getting tossed around just like a cork, and it drove the boat inshore and right on a big pointed rock, went right up in the bottom of her. We watched her. They were having a rough passage, the three men on board. So the captain decided to send his mate and the engineer ashore. So we had to get the Breeches Buoy working. Well, the old boat, we had the ropes tied on to where the lifeboats were. Of course, when the sea went down, the boat tipped over and then it came back the other way. The ropes kept tightening up and then slackening. But anyway, the engineer, he got in. Not the engineer, the first mate got in first in the Breeches Buoy, and we started pulling him ashore, and the rope tightened up, and then suddenly the waves came and the boat tipped over and down went the rope. We couldn't gather up the slack quick enough. Of course, he dropped down in the water. He got wet through, but he was still all right in the Breeches Buoy. He wasn't going to drown or anything like that, but he certainly got wet. But then after we got him ashore, we got the engineer ashore, which is Frank Honor. We learned later because he stayed at the pub and he never went away. He stayed in the pub until he died. He worked at the pub. He got friendly with the landlady, and that was it. He didn't go away. He never went back to sea after that. But anyway, we got Frank ashore without getting him wet, so he was quite pleased about that. He said he didn't go across first because he thought something like that might happen. So anyway, we got Frank and the mate on shore, dried out the mate because he was a bit wet, and wrapped the blanket around him and just watched the Sand Dart bump against a rock. So pitiful to see a boat like that getting crushed, rocks going up through the metal plates at the bottom. Anyway, the old Sand Dart was there well over a year, I believe, before they managed to get him off. And then in the end, they had to take the engines out, strip them down, and make them very light. They used to fill him up with water to keep him steady. But he took some sea while he was there, and I think they towed him back to New Haven in the end and rebuilt her, give her another name. So that was the Sand Dart, and my experience of coast guarding and lookouts. Well, it's not that good. You sit in the lookout. You keep looking out the windows, and if you get it too warm in the lookout, the windows steam up and you can't see out. It's a bit of a tricky job, really, and you've got to have your eyes open a lot. And a lot of times you never did see what happened because they were either under the cliff, and if you're sat in the lookout, you've got a lot of dead spots where you can't see over the cliff, and a lot of yachts they used to come in tight and come all up from Swanage and close into the cliff, and you probably wouldn't see them at all until they sort of appeared to the west, way out, going out to sea. But if they went into Chapmans Pool, you could miss them altogether. So I don't think the lookout was that good, although there were some you did see. If it was at night, you saw red flares, then it was all right. But a lot of the times when I've been up there, everything seems to happen under the cliff, and you get someone else report it to you. So, after years being out there, they sort of decided, of course, they took it into consideration all right, to go out on patrols in Land Rovers. That's how my time ended up as a Coast Guard. But in between whiles, we were up the lookout. Before that happened, it was all lookout. You had to go up to the lookout and look out. And you got to practice LSA. Then they changed it to CRE. We came into the cliff rescue then, because we hardly did any cliff rescue. The police used to do it, and then the Coast Guard took over from the police. So we had a different role to play, and after a while, after I don't know, may have been only 2 or 3 years ago, which was 1990 or 89, something like that. They did away with the Breeches Buoy and what they call Jack Stay and all that stuff. So we just had cliff rescue. So now, if anything runs aground, they're all picked up by helicopter now, and they don't really need us anymore. Not for that sort of work, but you really always need a Coast Guard about, I think, to keep an eye on things. But like they say, most of the time, someone else reports it and you go to the rescue. There is places where helicopters can't get, or the weather may be too bad, thick fog and things like that. So there's always a need for the Coast Guard, I should think, anyway. But getting back to Coast Guard work, well, talking about Coast Guard work, sometimes you were in a position. I've been at Chapmans Pool when you can't call the Coast Guard. There was no way. I didn't have a radio in the early days, and if I've seen anyone stuck on the cliff, I've sometimes gone to the rescue and helped them up over, or things like that. I remember going to a girl on Houns Tout. She needed she was stuck on the cliff. Her friend had got down over, and she got halfway and couldn't go either way. I managed to walk. I've been round the cliffs plenty of times, so I managed to walk round to her, and she was shaking like a leaf, frightened to death. But after I talked to her for about 10 minutes, she sort of got her nerve back, and I just held her arm and helped her up over the cliff. She'd hurt her foot a little bit, but not too much. Could walk all right. But different little occasions like that where people hurt their ankles and just pick them up and give them a lift home, and a girl got stung by a wasp once. I gave her a lift away. She made her quite ill. And so sometimes, you're not in a position to get hold of a Coast Guard, but if you've got a radio, you're alright, you can soon call them up, especially these days. Radio, you can soon get in touch with the Coast Guard, where in the early days, you didn't have no communications at all. You just, you just got on with the job yourself. And that was it. If you managed to get them where you wanted to get them, or they wanted to get back to their cars, you got them back there, and probably told the Coast Guard about it afterwards. But now, with radio and things like that, you can get a helicopter in no time and pick them up and whip them to hospital. They're there in half an hour. They can be in the hospital, and when you get on with the job, go on back on patrol or something like that. Alright, now to tell you about the Lumey that ran aground. About 2 o'clock, I was on watch, lookout. About 2 o'clock in the morning, phone rang. A boat had ran aground. Ran aground? Where to? Oh, St Aldhelms Head. Well, I said, I've been looking out all night. I said, there's only a coaster out here, the usual one with the navigation lights going. I said, heading towards Weymouth. I said, he comes through every night about 2 o'clock. I said, it's a sandboat. He said, yeah, well, he said, it's a sandboat as reported it. He said, turn on your radio, because we didn't listen to the radios in them days. Not VHA. He said, switch on this channel 16, he said, and you'll be able to talk to me. I'll tell you what happened. So I called up the sand Piper, I think he was called, and he said, yes, a boat have crossed our bows, he said, way down in the channel and ran straight in the rocks at St Aldhelms Head. I said, yeah, I saw it. I saw you coming up by. He said, well, if you turn on your lights, he said, we can still see the light on the mast of the ship. He said, if you turn on your lights at the lookout, he said, I should be able to see whereabouts you are and we can give you a position. So he said, when I switched it on, he came back on the radio and said, oh, it's about a mile east of your lookout. I said, where then is that? He said, yeah. I said, okay, I'll call the Coast Guards out to search from Winspit up through. So I called all the rest of the boys out down from the houses, and they searched the cliff, and it was no more than about 200 yards away from the lookout under the cliff, right and under. So it must have came out, like I say, out of sight. Couldn't have been seen by me, only at one point, and it looks as though it was going all right. It was a beautiful night, calm sea, clear as a bell. Why he ran aground, I don't know. Someone must have dropped off to sleep on watch, I should think, as it was coming up through. It was a night you would have thought you wouldn't have had any trouble whatsoever. But there it was, on the rocks. So there's a full-scale alert then. Customs, the whole lot up at St Aldhelms Head, find out about her. So then we had to just keep watch over her, and whilst I was watching, two customs chap came up to me and said, we'd like to go aboard her. We got no boat available. Do you think you could take us? We hear you got a fishing boat at Chapmans Pool. I said, yes, I'll take you out there. So at that time, off we went. I took them, they drove down to Chapmans Pool with me. Got my little 12-foot boat out, engine on, outboard engine on, and away we went round St Aldhelms Head to the Lumey. Got there, and the captain and that accepted the custom chaps on board. They wanted me to tie up and go aboard as well, but I didn't. I just held on, sat down in the boat and waited for them to do what they had to do. And then we returned to Chapmans Pool. I asked him on the way what happened, how he come to run aground. He said, but the captain wouldn't say. There was nothing said why. So we never did get the right of it. So the old captain kept it to himself. I believe he was a Dutch chap. Anyway, we got back to Chapmans Pool, and I remember going home and having a good sleep for 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours, something like that. And then I returned to St Albans Head, and I think I was just back in time to see it being towed off. I believe it was the same night it went off, but I was there with my camera and filmed it when they pulled the bows right round, and she was pointing out the sea, and it wasn't long before they got her going. So that was the Lumey. Now getting down to the Marguerite, I believe she was called, that ran aground at Chapmans Pool. It was a night I was supposed to be on watch, and I caught the flu. I had it not too bad, but not good enough to get up in the lookout and keep a good watch. So I informed the station officer. He said, "Well, I'll do it for you," he said. Fairly new station officer over there. Forget his name at the moment, but he was on watch about 10:30. He had a boat run aground in Chapmans Pool. He thought it was Kimmeridge Ledges anyway, so he sent the message down, boat aground on Kimmeridge Ledges. So everybody called out, big gang of us in them days. There's about 20 odd chaps, and we got over the station, and of course the station officer wanted to be relieved up there. So one of the elderly coast guards, he wanted to. He said, "I'll go up," because he was in his I believe he was 60 then. George Walsh. He said, "I'll go up and keep a watch while the station officer does his bit, like." So I said, I went out, although I had the flu. I went out and I put a big white polar neck jumper on, wrapped up really well, sweating like a bull, Anyway, I got out there, and they said, who would pop George up? I said, I'll take him up to the lookout. And I got up there, and the station officer come out to look out, and he said, "Have a look over the top, Rish, see where this boat is." So I looked over the top. It was nowhere in Kimmeridge Ledges. Of course, he didn't know the lay of the land very well, because he was new. And I said, "Oh, that's just between Chapmans Pool and St Albans Head. Pier Bottom, near enough into Pier Bottom. That's where the boat had run aground." But when we got back to the station, all the crew had gone to Encombe because they thought he was on Kimmeridge Ledges. So someone had to wake the dairyman up in the house to catch them, to send them back to Chapmans Pool, which he did. But in the meantime, we made our way down to Chapmans Pool and walked along from the sheds a little way, and there he was right up on the rocks, right on shore. There's nothing we could do but just sit and watch and wait. Lovely quiet night. He'd mistaken, there was a new boy. Apparently he come round Portland Bill, Shambles lightship, and he said to the second mate, he said, "I'm going to have a sleep now." He said, go on till you see a flashing buoy and then take a certain bearing. Well, he didn't keep the same course. He saw a flashing buoy down off of it was off Arish Mell, the new one from the pipeline of Winfrey. He saw that flashing buoy, so he made his way down to there and then took a bearing, which he ended up in Chapmans Pool. But he must have just missed the ledges when he come over. He was only just outside of the ledges. But he did miss the ledges and ended in Chapmans Pool. So that's how that one come around. And then, of course, the rest of the crew, they got back to Chapmans Pool. But there's nothing we could do. We'd just wait till the next day till they got the towboats out and towed it off. So that was towed off fairly easy, although it was high and dry. But I didn't see that being towed off, but it did. And after my flu, I ran about so much that night that I really sweated it out. Had no sign of it the next day, so that was a good cure for it. And still there. That was the other one that ran aground. Yeah, talking about George Walsh. George was the oldest chap, I think, over at the station at that time. And I remember I was on watch one night from 6 till 12 midnight, and they used to always a Coast Guard used to relieve you at that time, and George was going to come on that night, and it was a hell of a windy night. I had a car up there, an old Series E type Morris, and George, before he went to bed, I suppose he went to bed about 7, he said, well, see what it's like, Reg, he said, but if to get too bad, he said, I'm going to have a job to get up there. I said, give us a ring when you get up and we'll see what it's like. And all through that evening, it blew hard. You couldn't stand up St Aldhelms Head. Nobody knows what it's like up there when it really blows. You just can't stand. Anyway, all through that evening, there was a hell of a gale wind blowing. Or didn't it blow? George got up, I don't know what time it was, 10, 11 o'clock, whenever it was. 11 o'clock, I think. He rang up, he said, because they left about 11:30. Rang up, he said, not going to be able to make it, Reg. I said, well, you better. I said, I've got to go to work next day. I said, you want to come on up? He said, can't you come down and get me? I said, yeah, I can, but what am I going to do about the lookout? Oh, he said, I'll come up to the Dutch barn, because it was pretty quiet walking up to the Dutch barn till he come out on St Aldhelms Head Road. He said, I'll come up the Dutch barn, he said, and flash me light. He said, you look out for it. He said, I'll give you a ring on the bell before I leave. He said, and then you watch out for the light. He said, and then get in your car, take the phone off the hook, get in your car, come on down and pick me up. I said, okay, I'll do that. So when the bell rang, I watched, and there he was flashing the light. So I jumped in my little car, managed to get out there because it was blowing. It was sort of in between storms. When a storm would come up, it would really blow. Anyway, I sailed down pretty well because I had the wind up behind me. Picked up George at the Dutch barn, ran back, come on back up, turned the corner to go up towards St Aldhelms Head, and the wind was blowing that hard. The old car, he couldn't make it. I had it in second gear first, and he jumped out. He always jumped out of second gear, and the wind pressure was so much that it jumped out of gear, put it in bottom, and it just wouldn't pull against the wind. So I had to wait for the wind to ease down, and then I drove on. Once I got going again, I was all right. So it just about made it up the straight. Turned up by the chapel and turned down the field, and the wind caught the car, and we were sliding on. There was no fences or nothing there in them days, and it just slid down the grassy field. George jumped, opened the door, the wind took the door back, and bang, bang, nearly took the door right off. Put the hinges right out. George jumped out and ran in. When I went and to put the phone back on, And when I went to get out, of course, the wind was blowing real hard and I couldn't move. I had to get on my hands and knees and crawl back to the lookout. Anyway, that was a bit of an experience out there that night. Terrible wind. When the wind blows at St Aldhelms Head, it certainly blows. That's it.